Okay, so the recording has started, and Reka, please, I give you this virtual floor to start your presentation.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
and I
you,
forget to
everyone.
introduce you. Sorry, I forgot to introduce the presenter. So can I just ask you to say a few words about yourself? Sorry for doing it
Uh, then
in
let
this way.
me, because I actually sent you this morning a short biography of myself, and it's such a nice text that I would like to read it out.
Okay.
Uh, so, hello everyone. First of all, before introducing myself, I would like to express my happiness that I get to encounter you, to meet you, if only virtually, but it's a nice thing to meet researchers who deal with this topic or similar topics around and across Europe. It's good to know each other, and it's good to find out about each other's results. I'm really looking forward to learning about your projects. I am a sociologist. I'm affiliated to Babes-Bolyai University in Cluj, Romania. And Katalin likes to refer to me as the lead researcher. I'm not really seeing myself as the lead researcher. I was the one who came up with the concept of how to organize and how to coordinate the fieldwork. It was a bit challenging because of the large number of participants and researchers, but what was the challenge was also a great advantage because we ended up having a very large amount of empirical data, which you will learn about later on. About myself, I am a researcher of gender inequalities in the world of work, not just the labor market, but work in generally, because my research focuses also on unpaid work, on care work, which is taken up by women mostly within their households. In the previous years, I have been a participant of a study that was looking at mothers' ways and strategies of tackling COVID and the first lockdown. We have extensively published from that study. And I have been also involved in projects that were focusing on women entrepreneurs and labor inequalities in generally part-time work among women and so on. So this is my specialty, and I was really honored to be given this opportunity. I have never before looked at academia, so this is my first project on academia, and it's a wonderful one because there are so many layers and a huge complexity of this project, and you can see that in spite of this being a hot topic, a very largely discussed topic, the data do not really show really big advancement of women's share in STEAM domains. So it is very important for us to understand the reasons behind this inequality. So this was my short presentation. I would like to switch to my presentation. I will do my best of sharing it. Let's see. And this should be it. No. Can you see my whole
Yes, we can
my
see.
the first slide? And I will move to the next one. Did you see the movement as well?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have around 15 minutes, which should be enough for me. So first of all, I would like to present the research because the project itself was already presented by Katalin. Then I will move to our part of the research because the research itself was very complex. But today I will only focus on the stream that I was responsible with and for which I have the data. And of course, the main findings will be the biggest focus of, or the most important focus of my presentation. So let me start with with the research. The research, of course, as you can imagine, was intended to serve as a fundament, as a point of departure for the whole project. The project is very activity oriented, by which we mean that we have activities and we have strategies to deal with women in STEAM. We would like to encourage girls to pursue education in STEAM fields, but for that we needed to provide an understanding and to provide a picture of the status quo. By status quo, I mean, what do we already know about why women are reluctant to pursue education, their studies in a STEAM field? What are those social factors that are preventing them from doing so? And even if they do, even if they take the first step, what are those factors that discourage them throughout their trajectories to finish or to move to the next step or to pursue a career in STEAM fields? For that, we came up with a rather complex idea of research. On the first hand, we had a research stream which focused on similar projects. So we tried to provide a map of Europe in terms of previous and ongoing projects that have been involved in encouraging women and improving the ecosystem of the STEAM world for women. So in this way, we conducted expert interviews with those project people and experts who have collected and have gathered experience in such projects, and to see what their results were, how they saw this whole approach, what were their experience with these projects. The second stream of research was trying to understand collecting data throughout the last year. For that, we started with a very wide literature review, in which we skimmed and scanned many articles that were published in the previous year, so in 2023, scientific articles which were somehow connected to women in STEAM. Then we conducted interviews with female students studying at all three levels of STEAM education: BSc, Masters, and PhD. And lastly, with the coordination or under the coordination of Katalin, we conducted expert interviews, not with project people, but with experts in all participant countries who were expected to have an idea of what's happening in their own countries in this field. So experts that were representing the state, educational institutions, higher education, NGOs, all dealing with improving women's share in the STEM field. Since I'm best informed by that particular part of research, which consisted of the semi-structured interviews with women in STEM, women students, female students in STEM or in STEAM. Today, I would like to share the results of that particular research only. I'm just speaking about the 97 semi-structured interviews that were carried out in 16 European countries. All of our partners had to conduct at least 8 to 12, to be more precise, 8 to 12 interviews in their own countries with girls or young women who were pursuing their studies at that time in whichever STEAM field that they found. Our partners were encouraged to try to contact young women from all of these three levels of study, so that their sample is not very biased and not very unilateral. And they were also encouraged to try to diversify their sample in terms of scientific field. So not only focus on mathematics, but try to include women from engineering and computer science and so on. As you probably know, the A letter from STREAM comes from arts. So we also did our best to involve or to include in our sample young women who were studying in some sort of art field or artistic field. And the last attempt that we were not really very successful in, but we also wanted to include women who were dropouts. So women who have given up their studies at either level of their study, because we are convinced that the very problematic part and the very problematic aspect of a field can be best understood via the experience of those who have decided to give up. But that part, I'm just sharing an inside knowledge. That part wasn't really successful. We really didn't manage to find as many young women dropouts or opt-outs as we planned. As for the European sample, most interviewees came from engineering, biology, ecology, and computer science. The sample was roughly equally distributed between the bachelor's, MSc, and PhD levels. And as you can see, out of the 97, we only managed to contact 2 opt-outs. And the majority of our interviewees were aged between 22 and 26 years. I will distribute, or I will present our findings in 3 subchapters, or 3. I will divide. I'm sorry, this was the word I was looking for. I will divide my findings subchapter into 3 topics. So we were looking at many things, in fact, but for this presentation, I'm only focusing on 3 topics: motivations, obstacles, challenges, and opportunities. I'm going back to the previous slide. So in terms of motivations, we applied a double approach. On the one hand, we asked them directly what their motivation was in starting their study journey in a STEAM field. But on the other hand, we asked them, especially at the beginning of the interviews, to share their journey, to just simply tell the story of how they ended up becoming a female student in a STEAM domain, having in mind the conviction that people not always have a very clear image of their real motivation. So we wanted to explore the underneath or the underlying stories, the underlying motivations that they are not always verbalizing. And from these 2 sources of information, we grouped their main motivations into 3 groups. Of course, the biggest majority of our interviewees have underlined or have emphasized their personal interests and aptitudes as the main motivation for their application to a STEAM scientific field. So the fact that they recognized from their high school years that they were good in a certain subject, and they were also encouraged by their teacher and I'm also moving to the next motivation. They were very they have really stressed the importance of their environment, both their family and teachers, to encourage them and to legitimize the fact that as a woman they are entitled to be good in a male dominated, in an otherwise male dominated domain. These motivations came up without us directly asking about it. So the very importance of parents who have never told them to give up studying mathematics as a girl, and who encouraged them that it is a good track, it is doable, and they provided them with a good perspective. And also the role of teachers is a very important and a crucial one. And the third motivation, or the third type of motivation, is the belief that that studying or focusing on a STEAM career will provide them with good career perspectives. So the very reputation of STEAM, the prestige, the good income that it provides, was a really good and a really important pull factor for them to embark on STEAM careers. As for the opportunities and obstacles, let me start with the opportunities, in spite of the fact that that's not the order of my presentation. What they underlined as a very important opportunity for them, so factors that encouraged them, factors that provided a good environment for them, were on the first hand signs and gestures given by their important people from their environment, by which I mean teachers, colleagues, co-workers, co-researchers, who made them feel at home, who made them feel that they belonged there. And about belonging, I will speak a bit more later, separately. The other one, the lack of social pressures. This is a very important and interesting thing. There were many young women who underlined that, or who emphasized the fact that it's good to be a girl studying in a STEAM domain, because I'm not pressured to choose a subtopic or a subdirection within my field that pays well. I'm allowed, as a woman who will not become the main provider of our family whenever I will start a family. So I shouldn't be focusing on pay alone. So I'm allowed to choose a topic that doesn't pay well, but what is interesting for me. So as a computer science, I can decide to pursue research instead of going to a company that pays well. So this was a very interesting thing to transform a disadvantage into an advantage. This was very interesting. And the very belief that time is on our side. I'm not very convinced that they are right, but who am I to evaluate their thoughts? But they said that time will prove that at one point women will be on equal terms in STEAM in STEAM domains. So at this moment we might be the minority, but we are on a good track. What challenges them? What are the most important obstacles? On the first and the most often mentioned one are gender stereotypes and expectations. Whether it's teachers, whether it's friends or colleagues. They have many stories about male colleagues not trusting them that they will know the answer, and other instances like this. The incompatibility between women's social roles and the representation of the STEM scientists or expert. By this, we mean that the STEM scientist, the ideal image of a STEM scientist is a man who dedicates his whole life and all of his work hours to his work, and does not have a family, does not have other responsibilities, and even as students, female students were very aware that they will not be able to meet this expectation, and hence the difficulties in balancing work and family. Um, and and the pair of the first factor in opportunities, they very often suffered from unwelcoming chilly climate in their studies or in their classrooms. And from all this, as a conclusion, I would like to underline the factor of belonging, their quest, their search for this feeling of belonging. They actually never mentioned this word itself, but as a motive that emerged very often in the interviews across Europe, in all of the interviews or in most interviews, was the very crucial importance of feeling as belonging. They suffered if they did not feel that, and they were very happy and very content if they were given this possibility to feel as belonging to the STEAM project or the STEAM study group that they were a member of. So what our next step is to write an article of this belonging feeling, to try to explore all the multiplexity and the complexity of how this belonging is understood by the female students, and perhaps also formulate some policy recommendations, especially for schools and university programs, what they can do in order to ease that thing, to give this feeling of belonging to the very few women who are embarking on studies in field. So this is my last argument. I'm really looking forward to your presentations and to your questions. Maybe we can find similar points in our research. Thank you.
Thank you, Reka. I think one of the most interesting thing what we found is this sense of belonging. I don't know if I should call it a sense or a feeling, but it's something like a sense of belonging. And I would be, as this is not the part of the research I was involved in analysis, so that's why I would like to ask you that what can you say about those women, like what lessons can we learn from those women who have the sense of belonging actually? And I am asking it because what I experienced is that we met with women, so our interviewees who presented themselves as successful in their fields, like successful professionals in their fields. And I know that we were looking into the challenges, into the barriers. But what would you say that what those women do who have this do like good, like well, who have this sense of belonging? Have you met with this?
Yes, in many times.
With
So
this
actually,
experience? Yeah.
yes. They were grateful. They were grateful and consequently very motivated to outperform their male colleagues, to become even more motivated, to dedicate even more time to the program, to excel, to find additional fields in which they can prove their competence. So I think that the experience of being accepted, and I'm really not trying to to become a psychologist. So this is not psychology on my part because I'm not a psychologist. It's a um, social in, we could also call it a social embeddedness. So being accepted, feeling herself as a legitimate member of the community, not being asked very often, why are you here? What are you up to? Why are you representing a minority? Not being challenged in your competence. So I can see that. So one of the main conclusions of our research, from my point of view, that this feeling of belonging was working as an engine for women. So it really motivated them. And in those cases when they felt refused and felt excluded, worked as a discouragement. And in many cases, I was almost sure that at one point they were deciding to give up because and it's quite difficult. I was even talking to you, Katalin, if I can remember correctly, if a professor from a science field or STEAM field would ask me or asked me what should they do in order to feel women welcome, it's actually very, very difficult. So I wouldn't be in a very easy position to tell them how to operationalize feeling welcome. But I think I think that we actually found a very key factor of why women leave, why they feel chilly climate.
Okay, thank you, Reka. I think it was a whole lot of other things what you were saying, like this putting this extra efforts and like what kind of capitals they have to like use to have this feeling of being welcome. So this is a lot. This is also a question that who is the like so in a way what it tells me that women still need to be normalized to be accepted. So there, it just shows that there is a huge differences still between the women and male scientists, which is
May I
difficult to
add
see,
something?
which is
Yeah.
difficult to see, and I think that's why these are really good examples that you are talking about the sense of belonging. But I have to stop you here
Yeah.
because we
Okay.
have to give the floor and the time to our next presenter, Lucy Yeoman. So Lucy, please start your presentation if you are okay with it.
Of course, thank
Able
you.
to, are you
And
able to share?
yeah, let me just check. Yes, I can. Hold on, let me. Would you like me to quickly introduce myself first?
Yes, please. And can you speak a little bit louder because
Of course, I'm sorry. Yes, I did
no,
try to
I'm
type
sorry
it.
to ask this, but it's
No, no, it's okay.
important that we use.
Can everybody see my screen?
We can see
Okay.
your screen, the first slide.
Yes. Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So yes, just to introduce myself, I'm also a sociologist. I'm based within the School of Education. So previously my research has looked at so I say social inequalities in STEM because I'm really interested in social class and how that intersects with gender and race, ethnicity to amplify inequalities and the reproduction of inequalities in society. But more recently, I've been looking at academia actually, but specifically as in academics within academia. So, and I think it's quite interesting to think about that in terms of higher education in general, because I think that there's an assumption that you've got to university, and that means you've made it, and there are no more barriers, and there won't be any more barriers, and there won't be any more obstacles. And then it's a little bit of a sort of a harsh awakening, I think, for some. So I was so interested to see your results, Reka, and I think that you will see that there are some points of overlap between the things that I'm going to present here. It's a slightly different project, but I'm not going to start talking about the project. I'm going to start with the slide. I'm hoping you can see it. This is one I use when I'm talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion in STEM and in STEAM to people who are perhaps scientists or engineers. So they have some knowledge about the ideas around ED&I and some of the problems and some of the challenges. But I like to start with a little thought exercise. So I'm going to give you the same indulgence, even though you may be very familiar with these ideas. And I want you to think about, from your experience, has there been a time where you felt like you were an outsider or you didn't belong? It's that word again. Or you may have self-excluded yourself from prestigious pathways because you thought that they were too difficult or not for someone like you. Or you may have seen other people around you being treated differently to you, where you've managed your behavior in a certain context or overcompensated. So there's that notion of, you know, overworking. So people won't stereotype you so that you belong. You're just like those, you know, people from a shared socio-cultural background, where you found it difficult to say no to a task that you don't want to do, or you've not understood that particular choice was, you know, generally seen as better until it wasn't an available choice for you anymore. So I just want you to have a little think whether that resonates. I'm seeing, well, amongst the panelists, I'm seeing smiles and nods.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
For sure. The reason I've chosen these particular things, I won't take too long. The reason I've taken these particular things, these are things that have been generated for literature around how inequalities manifest in day-to-day living and in day-to-day spaces for gender and for social class and for ethnicity. Of course, there are other kinds of characteristics that are marginalized, but I'm just going to focus on those three today. I find it really hard to talk about gender just on its own. I do think it's really important to understand how gender operates and how social class operates and how race and ethnicity operates. But I find it difficult to only talk about it, so I'm not going to. I'm sorry, I'm not completely following the brief. So hence I put gender, etc., equality or equity, depending on your preference in higher education. So here are some of the problems that I see. We know the stats. I mean, this is a UK stat. It's getting a bit old now, but white middle class males, so not just men, but white middle class males make up 43% of undergraduates studying STEM subjects in the UK. That's a phenomenal percentage. But when you look at other subjects, they only make up 29%. And that's really interesting. And I expect that hasn't changed since I got that data back in 2018. And similarly to what Reka was saying, this continued pervasive chronic association that there are certain identities that are natural to certain disciplines. So there are certain people that just naturally fit within science. There are certain people, and you can't even just say that, you know, women are a more natural fit to humanities, because there are hierarchies within arts and humanities subjects as well. Within classics and philosophy, those sorts of subjects are still skewed towards white males. And women in education is the other end of it, or women in biological sciences. Oh yes, women can be in psychology, social psychology, but not in a hard science, because that's where the brilliant people are. And there's some really interesting research that's looking at the higher the level of brilliance that's associated with a discipline, the lower the representation of women and other minorities. Also, the current economic landscape, more and more people are going to university, but that becomes more and more high risk for them. And we've seen that, how it's playing out in terms of students' use of AI and other things. And it means that when it comes to subject choice, they're less likely to want to take a risk on a subject that won't necessarily convert to a job, clearly convert to a job. And I believe, and I did try to find some data on this, and I only found a kind of mention of it in a report. I'm sure the data must exist, but I expect that risk, because I know that there's research around risk and, you know, sort of choice management more generally, that underrepresented groups are less likely to want to take high risks. So, for example, if you think that you want to go and do a very competitive elite subject at university, if it's not going to go towards a job, then you're probably not going to go for it if you're wary of risk. Something that's an issue that's in the UK, and I know that that's not representative of other countries necessarily, but in the UK, we're particularly bad at making students choose subject choices very early on. And what they tend to do is it tends to silo them into kind of one stream or another. And it's very hard to switch back and forth. And what happens is that from a very early age, unless you've got that very encouraging environment that's been spoken about earlier, you can self-select out. And if I know that we talked about capitals earlier, but one of the things that Pierre Bourdieu used to talk about is this notion of symbolic violence, where people of an oppressed group become complicit in their own oppression. So they're self-selecting out of subjects that they might have otherwise enjoyed, because they feel like they don't belong, because they feel like it might be high risk. They think of it as an individual choice, but not recognizing that actually this hostile obstacle course. So there's some lovely literature around forgetting the pipeline and saying it's not a pipeline, it's a hostile obstacle course, has basically meant that when they might have really enjoyed science or STEM or arts or humanities or whatever, they self-select out of it, and they don't realize that it kind of was an individual choice, but it kind of wasn't. And in terms of actually thinking about STEAM, because obviously this is very sort of STEAM arts focused, in terms of STEAM, one of the wonderful things about STEAM that we all know is that it recognizes that in the real world, we're not divided into arbitrary disciplines. The real world is complicated and messy, and one of the opportunities of STEAM is to address real world problems in a inter-transdisciplinary way. But if people are being siloed out of different subjects and not doing things like STEAM, then it means that the people who will end up addressing the problems, like the climate crisis, for example, they're not going to be representative of the broader population. They're going to be skewed towards a certain demographic. That has issues. And that's not just an issue of kind of the broadest talent pool we can possibly get. That has social justice implications and epistemic justice. So this notion that the knowledge that's produced about the world and about the problems of the world is produced by a small group of society, and that's a problem. So these are the problems of gender, etc., equality in higher education, certainly from a UK perspective, but I'm sure a lot of that resonates with other countries. So when we think about STEAM and the opportunity to offer STEAM programs within universities, it brings in the possibility so people can opt in when they may have been skewed out, when they may have self-selected out. And we talked about subject stereotypes earlier, and that's come up a couple of times. We think about transdisciplinary, and I'm assuming people understand what I mean by transdisciplinary. It's kind of the in-between space. It's thinking about the problem that you try to solve, that you want to solve, and using the different approaches that are appropriate and necessary to do it, regardless of whether it's a physics approach or an arts approach. But if things are presented as transdisciplinary and we have a wide group of people engaging in that, then in the long term, my hypothesis is that will end up softening those subject stereotypes, or potentially directly challenging them, because someone can have opted in and suddenly they say, oh, actually, I'm really good at this, hard maths stuff, and I didn't think I was, and I'm from a marginalised group. Now, there is evidence about how highly abstract academic topics can be off-putting for people from marginalised groups, especially when it's from a working class background. But I think we have to be very careful about making totalising claims and saying if someone's from a working class background, that means that they're not interested in the highly academic, highly theoretical, highly abstract stuff. So there's a lot of real world application in terms of STEAM practices, which can appeal to marginalised groups because there's a connectivity there. but STEAM has the potential to still blend academic and applied knowledge so that we don't make these deficit judgments about marginalized groups and say, oh, they're only interested in, you know, this kind of stuff and they're not interested in the high level stuff. I do want to talk about the fact that there seems to be an assumption, and this has come out of some of the work that we've done in RoadSteamer in terms of desk-based literature research, that there seems to be this just assumption that by being STEAM, it's already inclusive and it can fix the gender or diversity problem. And I think we need to problematize this notion. What we found also in terms of our literature searches in the RoadSteamer project is that, and this is in academic published literature, that loads of it, I mean, I'm talking about nearly half of the stuff that we looked at doesn't use any theory at all. I mean, we talked about loads of constructs today that are theoretically based. Sense of belonging is a highly constructed notion from social psychology. Capitals, if you're thinking about it in a Bourdieusian sense, comes from sociology, and there's a whole theoretical framework about that. And when we're doing our research, we do that, but they're not applying it, and that's a problem. And in fact, I've written a whole paper about why that's a problem if you're interested in reading it. But for me, in terms of diversity, it can have a danger of reproducing inequalities. I've read a paper that's looking at academia that says it was written by mathematicians about their mathematics department, and the conclusion was women leave mathematics because they have babies. And that was the end of the paper. There was no discussion about perhaps the lack of structural support that might have been available within the department for them to come back after they had been on maternity leave, or, for example, challenging discrimination, because there's lots of evidence about women being discriminated against as they return from maternity leave because they've had a lovely relaxing break. I mean, obviously that's a complete nonsense. If anyone's ever been on maternity leave or known anyone who's been on maternity leave, that's absolute nonsense. And I would say, we can talk about that for a long time, I expect. And the last point, and the point that I'm going to bring it directly rooted into something that's been an output of RoadSteamer, is as a result of that lack of theory and in general, it seems like the quality of STEAM practice varies. I mean, we would expect that anyway. But what we decided to do in the RoadSteamer project, one of the outputs was to do a desk-based, it was the methodology that was designed. And I've got some slides at the end that I can share with you if you want to know a bit more about how we did it. But it's essentially a scoping review where we looked at STEAM practices, and they were limited to a certain extent by the boundaries of the RoadSteamer project, which is looking at secondary to tertiary education and the interface between open schooling and open science, for example. So that it very much frames that kind of stuff, not the same sorts of it's not undergraduate programs. It's more that interface between these, you know, these four sort of spheres. So as a result of one of our outputs, doing a scoping review and looking at principles and of good STEAM practice, we came up with some criteria. I've skipped ahead of myself. This is the RoadSteamer project. So I'll come back to this. These are the criteria that were found. So to be good STEAM, it needs to have some element of creativity. And that doesn't have to necessarily come from the arts. The arts shouldn't be seen as being in service to STEM. It should be an all-round principle of STEAM practice. It should involve collaboration. It should involve disciplinary interrelationships. It should involve a real-world connection. It has some aspect of thinking and making and doing. It should have some sense of inclusion and personalization and empowerment. And really importantly, and I have to say, I'm the only sociologist on this program, and I didn't make this, but I'm really glad to see that equity was seen as an underlying value, and it needs to basically just, I'm trying to think of a nice word, it just needs to unpin it needs to flow through. It needs to be underneath. All of the practice should be all about equity. So let me just quickly tell you about the Road Steamer project, because I think that's important. It's looking at creating a roadmap to support STEAM education. It's looking at the transition between secondary and tertiary education. So the methodology has always been participatory. So we've used collaborative dialogues and co-creation events. So even with the creation, with the criteria, there was some initial empirical research and desk-based research. And then there were co-creation workshops with stakeholders where they were elaborated and interrogated so this is a result of that methodology. So the top one is the criteria. We're looking at the evidence base indicating the need for STEAM education. It's very policy focused with our project. So we've got a lot of policy related deliverables, which might be interesting for people, especially because we do speak to the gender equity aspect of that. And it's involved mapping real life case studies of effective STEAM practice. So these criteria are all well and good, but how do we use them in a way that's actually helpful, meaningful? It's very nice to have, good principles. And what was created through the project were these radar or spidergrams. And what we did was as a collective, all of the consortium, we had identified through a different work package, lots and lots of STEAM practice across the European landscape. And we created case studies of them, and then we assessed them against those criteria, and we created these spidergrams. So this is one that is from a higher education context. It's a collaboration between the University of Birmingham and a Greek university. And they're developing practical workshops for primary and secondary schools. So there's that kind of relationship between higher education and secondary education. Highly sort of thinking, you can see it's all about visual arts. So you can see that the thinking, making and doing and the creativity are really highly scored on this particular one. And because it's the particle physics group, the disciplinary interrelationship scored high. But actually the equity was okay, but it wasn't as high as it could have been because they hadn't particularly prioritized making it either specifically for a marginalized group or putting things in place to make sure that they were there. And I think that this is really important. I've done research before looking at out of school science stuff, extracurricular activities, and the impact that has on people's ongoing retention in science and those sorts of subjects. If you've heard of the Aspires project, I did my PhD on the Aspires project, which came up with the science capital construct. And what we see from marginalised group is that opting out again of things and activities that may not be their kind of thing, may not be where they can see themselves going. But also there's lots of evidence around people from privileged backgrounds, resource hoarding, opportunity hoarding. Well, that looks good, being very strategic. Oh, I'm going to use that for my benefit. I can see that would benefit me later on in these sorts of senses. So actually there's an imperative, if you want to address equity and diversity, if you want to address underrepresentation, that you're going to have to put in a bit of work to make sure that you are engaging with these underrepresented groups, that you put things in place. And I think, that question that you asked before about, how can we take good practice or good experiences of sense of belonging? I think that's complicated. I think that involves creating dialogue with the group that you want to involve, because I think one of the things, I think we can have some insights and understandings from our research, so we can think about things more broadly. But what we don't want to end up doing is very top-down initiatives of what we think. One of the things that really bothers me in research and in academia and in real life is that you can have good intentions, but that doesn't mean that you have good outcomes necessarily. In fact, you don't even have to have bad intentions. You could just have neutral intentions and still have bad outcomes. So this is kind of my last slide. But I just wanted to come back to that question, and I think that that would be something that would be interesting for us to discuss of how we can, in an equitable way, in a way that speaks to social justice, but also to epistemic justice, that respects the perspectives of people who are from underrepresented groups, and doesn't sort of say, well, we think we know what the issue is, so let's just give you a solution. They may say, well, I'm not interested. So I hope that's been useful. I hope you've got a sense of what, you know, the Road Steamer project is about. I've got a link to our website that has on this slide that has the interactive map. But the major output of this project is a roadmap of policy recommendations in terms of STEAM education, and there is definitely a gender equity and inclusion aspect to that. So when that's published, I'd be really happy to share with this group. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. I also would like to recommend those who would like to learn and how to turn STEM into STEAM education, visit the Road Steamer website, because there are lots of useful materials. And speaking of the social justice and equity, so what really catch my eyes from your presentation is this expression of the danger of reproducing inequalities. And you well explained that, for instance, if diversity is not viewed from the framework of the structural, institutional, I don't know, background or factors, so then the equality can be reproduced. And I'm really interested in if you have discussion in your project, or what do you think of the role of art in the STEAM methodology in reproducing inequality?
Art as a way of reproducing
inequality. Similarly to
we have, that's such an interesting question. I mean, we haven't really had, because of the nature of the project, it's the equity and equality and diversity inclusion does not have the same central focus as it does for your project. So, you know, it doesn't feed into every conversation we have. I think that
maybe it's a bad question. Sorry
you might have to come back to me.
It's not a good question.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I'm not as familiar with the literature. And I mean, like I said, there are hierarchies around art subjects as well. There are definitely art subjects that are still seen as a lot of it is very much the stuff that's associated with the kind of very highly cerebral, very abstract, and the more applied and real world. So I'm just doing some revisions on a paper that looks at thinking about cultural capital in two different ways, thinking about use value and exchange value, cultural capital from a working class perspective. And I think that, you know, one of the things that distinguishes the use value, one of the intrinsic things is an object that has, I've got nothing, an object that has nothing, no value. This is an origami rose. I'm trying to think of a cultural object that I could show you. So the use value of this object is pretty minimal because it's just there to look, you know, beautiful. But if I had a teapot that I had obtained that was from a exotic, and I use that word very critically, an exotic location, I would be maybe putting that up on my shelf. This does answer your question, I promise. I would be, you know, I could put that up on my shelf and I could have my friends come over and they could say, oh, that's a beautiful teapot. And I would say, yes. And I'd tell them the story of how I'd obtained it. And it would, you know, it would give me a form of cultural capital, because people will think, oh, Lucy, isn't she so well traveled and she's so learned and she has such excellent taste. I'm sure people say that about me all the time. But the people who originally used that teapot would say, this is just a teapot, you know, that's its function. It's vital in my life, but it's just a teapot. It doesn't mean anything beyond that scope of its use. And, you know, Rekha talked about like labor you know, the labor that women do in their homes. And I think when we think about arts, if there are arts where there's a really obvious use value, then I
Well,
can
I think
imagine.
it's, yeah, I think there is. That's why I'm asking that, like I think this is something we have to think of those who would like to promote STEAM approach. Why is the art there? Is it so it has a meaning? I think it has a value
Oh
that
yeah,
we, because STEAM approaches for like to turn education more inclusive on a more equity-based environment.
yes,
So I think it has a meaning and it has a like a risk, how you put it, for the
definitely.
example of diversity, that it will create inequalities without an intention to do it. So that's why I'm really interested in it. How do you or your project see
Definitely.
this
I think we should
question?
carry on this conversation later. It's definitely been a bit of a they've been very receptive. But my colleague, who's the lead at Exeter, is an arts educator.
Mhm.
And she's sort of very politely saying, it's not arts for STEAM, they're not arts for STEM. It's STEAM where the arts have a very equal place, please, please, please. And we've seen how the arts as described has evolved throughout
Mhm.
the project because people are coming on board with it. And this is very much entrenched within the discourse.
Mhm.
It's the economic argument. We need to get more people more people doing STEM because that's going to help, you know, our
Mhm.
economies and it's going to help address world problems. We need more people going into STEM. You know, we know that we need to have better equality. Um, Women like the arts, so let's put arts together, and that's
Yeah, that's why exactly I have this question. So what is important is that we really have to be careful how we define the R, the A within the STEAM. Okay, so thank you, Lucy. Thank you for your presentation. And after getting this very good overview of where are and what are the challenges and actually how should we improve STEAM education, let's hear Eleni presentation of a real case of STEAM, of implementing a STEAM approach in higher education.
Okay. Hello everyone, and thank you once again, Katalin, for the invitation. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
we can
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay.
And if
I
you could
will.
start with introducing yourself a little bit,
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
few words about yourself.
So yeah, my name is Eleni Hadzidaki, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Computer Science at Norwegian University of Science and Technology. I originally come from Greece, but I live in Norway for 8 years, almost 8 years. So you can understand my pronunciation is not, it's a Greek one. I have a computer science background and I hold a PhD in human-computer interaction. And my current research focuses on interactive learning environments and game-based learning, but also in STEM education. So I am a part of this project, SLEs, that I will just present you right now. I need to share my screen. Can you see my slides? Or maybe I have to open it a bit, I think. Yeah.
Yes, we can see your slides.
What about now? Yeah.
We
Okay.
can see it. Yeah, both are good.
Okay. So if I go,
And we can
you can
see
see
that you're
the change.
switching
Okay.
between your slides. Yes.
Okay. So I will present the STEM Learning Ecologies project, also known as SLEs. And a case study we implemented in NTNU. The case study is linked to an NTNU course that is called Customer Driven Project. And its main goal is to bridge the gap between university and industry. So I will start with some basics for the project. The SLEs is a 3-year project funded by the European Commission through Horizon Europe program, and it's coordinated by European Schoolnet and brings together 13 partners from 11 countries across Europe. Our goal is to improve science education and make it more open and accessible to everyone. That means working together with several stakeholders, such as schools, industry, science centers, and the wider community. So let's see, what do we mean by STEM learning ecologies? In every SLE, the learners are in the center, while learning is taking place through a variety of local partnerships. So this is SLEs in the picture. These partnerships are can be between formal, informal, and non-formal education providers, industry, and civil society. So all these partnerships together, they form an ecology which aims to provide a solution on a real-life problem. I think you are all familiar with this terminology, but I would like to introduce the project so you know what it is about. In the SLE project, we have 3 core elements. So first is STEM, that promotes creativity, critical thinking, and real-life problem solving by combining all the aspects of science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. And secondly, we have open schooling as the main pillar, and environment promoting partnerships between different societal actors and the local community. And the Living Lab approach as a key practice that emphasizes the central role of the user and the co-creation process that we have. Together, these elements create a dynamic learning ecologies. So we are now in the last year of the implementation of our project. And the project has 2 main phases, as you can see in this slide. In the first one, we implemented 13 pilot ecologies with over 600 learners. And in the mature phase, we will implement 100 ecologies and reach more than 2,000 learners. So we are in the middle of the mature phase now. Each SLE, each ecology, follows a learning scenario and creates, as an outcome, a real learning artifact. So I will present later an example from NTNU. So overall, SLE's project are built on strong partnerships that connect multiple stakeholders, with mentoring playing a central role. Learners engage with the real-life challenges across different learning settings, either university or industry, that is our example, while gender equality remains a key focus. So learners, through this experience and support, they are better prepared for future academic, professional, and personal growth. So these were the slides for the project. Please feel free to scan this QR code if you like to explore the available SLE stories that we have from the pilot phase. And as a part of the project, we created several outputs, a methodology for building SLEs, and the SLE stories from our pilot phase, and 2 policy briefs. And we hope to inspire also others to build similar learning ecologies in their own learning context, of course. Okay, so now we'll present the case study of the customer-driven project course from NTNU, which was a part of the SLE project in the pilot phase. So long story short, in a customer-driven project, students collaborate directly with real clients to design and develop software engineering solutions. They participate in the full software development process, from initial planning and requirements gathering to coding, testing, and final presentations. So the students work in teams of 6 to 7 people usually, and each team collaborate with an industry representative. In this way, together, they identify a topic within the software engineering field and work on design a realistic software prototype, and that is related to solve a real-life problem. In our pilot case study, the stakeholders of the SLE, were university students, professors, teacher assistants, industry professionals, and public sector representatives. So in total, 65 students were participating in this pilot between 21 and 24 years old, supported by 7 university teachers and 11 professionals from the industry. The primary challenge was, as I said before, to bridge the gap between theory and practice by enabling students to work on real-life problems. And the aim was to help students build practical software engineering skills through a project-based approach, through the whole project that they had to complete. There are several benefits from this SLE because this hands-on experience gave students the opportunity to apply their theoretical knowledge in a practical and meaningful way. Through these industry partnerships, they gained valuable real-life experience by working in a team and collaborating with a real customer. And they developed necessary skills such as project management, professional communication, collaboration. But most importantly, the whole experience for the students provide a clear understanding of what a career in software engineering looks like in practice. So at the end of the project of the SLE, students delivered 3 different learning artifacts. The first one was a functional minimum variable product, that is a software prototype, a written report, and a formal presentation outlining the entire process that they follow. Some examples of these artifacts are a virtual reality training application that we can see in the picture with the students working collaboratively, and a software solution for education and healthcare. This is only an example. We had almost 5 different software products. So about the gender balance in this course of NTNU, this table shows the gender participation in the course over a 7-year period from 2017 to 2023. You can see the year followed by the number of the teams participating, not the students. And then we have the number of percentage of male and female. So we can clearly see here the increase in the female participation. In 2017, women represent only 23% of the students. By 2023, we had almost 48%. So while male students are still the majority overall, the gender gap has become much smaller in recent years. This is very encouraging development in the course, showing that more women are joining the course and would like to participate in software engineering projects. I would like to share with you some examples of studies on the gender balance in the field of software engineering. So here is an older study examining the roles that female students had in software and engineering tasks during the customer-driven project course. And the chart shows the distribution of the number of students by gender, like the orange one is the female and the blue the male. And you can see that the female students were mostly involved in administrative tasks. For example, the project management task has 30 females and 15 male students. But in a more technical task, such as architecture, Scrum practices, testing, and even programming, their participation was much lower. Only two female students will have participated in the architecture task compared to 43 male students. So the difference is huge, and this result suggests that this study suggests that while women were active in the project, they have limited participation in more technical tasks. And I think that this is a bias that we have, that we are, there is an assumption that women are more for the more managerial or administrative and supportive roles, and not for technical. Another study that the participants were children explored how children imagine software engineering by asking them to draw what they think a software engineer looks like. And I think this is a really nice study. If you like to read about, to read more things, I can share the paper with you later on. So the researchers collected in total 171 drawings. Of those, 51% showed a man, while 44% showed a woman, and 4% were gender neutral. So compared to older studies, these results are promising. And this is a study from 2023. And they suggest that children's perception of gender in technical roles are becoming more balanced. But I think gender stereotypes still exist, and especially among older children. And in this, specifically in this study, when the researchers grouped the results from the students by age and gender, among 11-year-old girls, only 23% drew a woman as a software engineer, while 54% drew a man, and 23% of the drawings, the gender was unclear. So while the overall picture is more positive, there is still a gap when it comes to how older girls see themselves in these more technical roles. So this was my last slide. I will not say anything more. And yeah, I have my contact information here and the QR code from the Learning Computer Interaction Research Lab that I am member in. Please feel free to contact me if you want to ask something, or if you would like me to share any of the studies that I had in my presentations. And yeah, and one more thing, please use this QR code if you like to join in our international community of the SLEs project, because we have some very interesting workshops coming up. So please feel free to join our international community. It will be nice to share your thoughts with us. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Eleni. Thank you very much.
I have to stop share now.
Well, you can leave it here, so people
okay.
can still have the chance
Yeah.
to scanning your information. And in the so I would like to encourage the participants, because we are still have participants with us, to enter your question under the Q&A tab or under the chat tab. And till we receive question, I would like to ask you, so you were talking about what the university students learn. So you said that they learned project management, they said they learned software programming, and I don't know, they analyze real world problems. But how does this project or this project based course helped them to improve their confidence, or how this project helped them to stay motivated to enter into the professional world? So what about those skills, which are not the hard skill, but the confidence and the career plans?
I think because of this project this course is a project-based course, and can be transformative, let's say, for women in software engineering, because the course allow students to apply their skills in a real world setting. So they have to collaborate. They have every week they have meetings with an industry representative and with a supervisor, and they need to bring the theory that they have learned from the university into practice, into real practice. So I think for women, this experience challenge the stereotype that software engineering is a male-dominant field. And because of this study I showed you earlier, in the course, we have now this role rotation in the teams, inside the teams. So everyone needs to pass a bit from a program or more technical role. At least we encourage students to do it, and I think this is a great opportunity for students to see how it is to work in the field, let's say, and have and get a holistic picture of how it is to work in a company, to work as a software engineer, and not only as a project management or something less technical.
So it's basically experimenting all the roles, and they have the experience that what they figure out what they planned, they can implement it in a real scenario. Okay, since we have not received any questions, I would like to have one more question. Lucy has a hand up, so before I ask any questions, just please go on.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to quickly check if there was anything in the Q&A first, but I was just thinking about what you were saying, Eleni, about the project-based learning, and it's project-based learning. So there's a university in England where the engineering department has transitioned to an entirely project-based learning approach. Like all of its programs are like that, and they've done it as a way of trying to support gender equity in engineering. And actually, I did a very short literature review to try to look at the evidence around it. And this is another one of those examples where people are saying, "Oh, it's great," but there was no real understanding of why it might be great. What are the mechanisms? How are the ways of working? And I'm thinking back to something else that you said, Eleni, in one of the studies about female students being disproportionately doing administrative tasks, and there is other evidence of that. I can point you to a paper that someone that I've worked with before has done, where they've done a lot of research looking at sense of belonging. And they did a study, I think, in the physics department at the University of Exeter, where they had videos looking at experiments, and they actually did video analysis of how the students were working together, and basically the same thing happened, is the girls stood around making notes while the boys did the doing of it. One of the things that we've been talking about at the University of Exeter is perhaps post-pandemic doing a bit of a hard reset of expectations of students. And I wonder whether maybe that's something that we could be thinking about in terms of trying to create this more welcoming environment, of saying at the beginning, this is an inclusive environment. These are some rules, like they do in some schools, especially primary schools. These are the rules of behaviour. These are the rules of engagement. I'm wondering whether it might be a good idea for us to present some stats on the ways of working, not gender inequality in terms of representation, but, in lab environments or in workshops, girls tend to be given the administratives, giving that up front and saying, you're going to be working on a project-based, using a project-based approach. We don't want to see this. We want to see you actively working towards sharing these tasks more equitably among you, and how you work together will be one of the ways that you will be assessed. And I wonder whether that will help equip. I don't know, I'm just thinking, I feel like there's a good potential here in terms of that transition between the university and the world of work that you talk about. Whether that, there is a question, does that set them up for ways of working in the world of work, or does that set women up to think that working together is going to be much nicer than it really will be when they actually end up working in a formal, for an employer who may not be as inclusive. So it'd be interesting to know your thoughts about that. It's not really a question, it's just more of this has made me think about these ideas.
No, thank you very much for sharing all your thoughts. It's really interesting, and you please share this study with me if you like. I didn't know about this in the University of Essex. It was this engineering department that turned all the project-based. The
University of West of England.
Western England, okay.
Which is a university that historically serves a more diverse student population. It was, yes. Yeah. But that happened before I haven't heard of an update around it, but because the pandemic happened in between. But that was definitely something they were basically going all in on. And it was quite I'm building a whole new department, a whole new building to try to accommodate it.
Oh, I try to connect what you have just said, Lucy, with my last question, because I think so. It turned out it's important to speak of how to turn the universities into a welcoming environment, which for me also means like it's like a safe environment. At least before they enter into the workforce, we can turn the university as a safe environment. So what I would like to highlight here is the welcoming environment, the welcoming learning environment. And as a closing remark, what would be your a main message based on your research result, your project experience, of how to make universities safe and welcoming environment for everyone, so more gender equitable and more inclusive? Like, what do you think, what is really necessary to have at the universities if we want to make these institutions more welcoming and more safe for everyone? I know it's a too general and too broad question, but what do you see? What is really necessary that needs to be there?
Well, I answer because I was going to let someone else go first, but I think universities have to put their money where their mouth is. I think that they need to be thinking about inclusion in a holistic way, and they need to be applying it at every level. So they need to students and staff, and that's academic and professional services, need to feel confident that there's like there's no tolerance of discrimination. That at every level,
Okay.
there are opportunities at every level, and I think it has to be, when the best schools I've been in, the tone has been set from senior leadership. They've set the culture. They've made it very clear, where the boundaries are. There's been very clear lines, and I think universities tend to be very liberal places, and I think there's been some new research done very recently in the UK that says that's still the case. But we do know that universities can also be breeding. We've had some, stories that have come out in the news of these private, WhatsApp groups amongst students where they're saying discriminatory things about other groups. And I think there needs to be, senior, like, this is our approach. These are our policies. There will be no gender pay gap. We're getting rid of that. It needs to come from there.
Okay, so thank you. So basically, very briefly, everyone needs to be involved at every level. Okay, thank you. And I think I will pass it to Reka to answer because she needs to leave like in 1 minute.
I'm sorry, you were asking me the same question?
Yes. Yeah, I think
well,
the same
actually,
question as a closing remark from everyone. But you don't need to answer. You don't need to answer. You can say, I agree with everything what was said.
and no, I actually had answered that before when I said that I would be in a difficult position if someone asked me how to improve, what those programs could be that could improve the welcoming and this lessen the chilly climate for girls. So unfortunately, I think I would be in a difficult position to operationalize this. So I will need to pass this question.
Okay, thank you. And here I think I thank you, Reka, for coming and your participation because I know that you will need to leave. But Eleni, I would like to give the floor once more to you.
Actually, I agree with Lucy, what she said. We need to, because universities many times has this inclusivity as a side project, not in their policies, in their strategies. So I think they need to implement inclusion. Maybe they need to implement inclusion training for the staff and the faculty and the students, of course, and maybe by bias training, because there is bias conscious and unconscious. So we need some help to recognize our own biases sometimes, and in this way provide equal opportunity to all, and not only women. In more general inclusivity.
Okay, thank you. I think that this one, what you just said, is equally important, that it's not enough just only to receive that there is some information about gender equality, but we all need to actively contribute into counteracting and like deconstruct inequalities. Lucy, first I think you can we can continue with your reaction, and then we received a question for Eleni. But let's hear you.
I was going to signpost to the question just in case you hadn't seen it. But
also,
if people have time, because I know Reka has to go, but if people have time, I would like to talk about the hypercompetence notion that Reka talked about and what can be done. I suppose one of the points I was going to make is that I think everybody needs to be better informed about how inequalities actually manifest. So when they see, female students being the top of their class, they don't just go, oh, well, they're just, they're exceptional, which is problematic, or, oh, they're just the best student, that they recognize that actually this may be an issue of hypercompetence, which may, be related to their well-being, for example. So I think having these sorts of issues just more widely known as things of how these sorts of things manifest, I think would really help. But yes, I wanted to point to the question in
Yeah. I think I just read aloud the question. So this question was directed to you, Eleni. So thank you for your presentation and valuable work. Did you have any gender-based criteria or approach in the project for how to help students transition from the academic world to the business one regarding gendered experiences such as inequality, barriers, treatment, belonging? And how can universities prepare students for this huge change? Is it their responsibility? I think it would require another presentation from you to answer this question, but the floor is yours
Yeah,
again. So
I can explain that
yeah, you
this
can go on.
course is a master course. So the students take it in the last year of their studies. Sorry, I'm lost in because it is a huge question.
Yeah, so
Gender biased,
gender-based
gender-based criteria.
criteria or approach.
Unfortunately, no, because I mean, the students can sign themselves in the course, so we don't choose who is participating in the course. If you mean this, I'm not sure if I answer correctly, but we are trying to split the students in the groups, in the teams that we create in the course, and keep a balance from the gender perspective. Also, we have some lectures that the students participating, and we discuss several issues, several topics like project management or Scrum practices or equality, diversity, self-evaluation. So this is the students in this way, they have a lot of learning materials to they have a lot of learning materials, and they also have their own experience by collaborate with the customer and the client. So we, as a university, I don't think universities can prepare students for the huge change, because it's a huge change. But if you have some project-based courses, then you have hands-on experience, so you have hands-on practice, and they can see if they like these pathways, these career pathways, and they want to follow it or not. So I think not only in software engineering, but in general, we need to have more practice and less theory in the universities. And if it's their irresponsibility, I'm not sure if do you mean the responsibility of the universities or of the students? I suppose from a university's perspective. But I think it is part of university's responsibility to provide to students more practical knowledge, and not only theoretical knowledge. I hope I answered the question.
I think it's also a very interesting question, because it somehow assumes that the change, or maybe continue this thinking, the difficulties, the challenges are outside of universities. And actually, this is something which really resonate with the research results we have in our research. And this is going to be my closing sentences. So it was interesting to see, because what we gathered from our data is that, so we as a representative of universities, that what they think, what are the challenges the women face in universities or in secondary education. And there was a tendency that the representatives of the universities, they were speaking of the challenges outside of the university. So the challenges either coming from the secondary education, from the parents, from the teachers, and it's coming after they graduate from the university. So there was this tendency. So this is, I think it's also interesting to see that how the universities see themselves. Okay, I think it is time to thank you for your presentation and participate in this webinar, and thank you for the participants, the attendees to come. And I think it was really like useful, valuable, and especially that we move from theory to practice. So thank you once again, and we will send all kind of useful information to the participants.
Thank you, Kathleen, for organising.
Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. I also learned a lot from you, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and have a nice afternoon to all of you. Okay, bye.
Stay in touch. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.